سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله. وأشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وأولاده المعصومين بالحق حجج الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير العمل. حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة. قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. يا حسن قد أتاك المسيح. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر. ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر. تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر. سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجاته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على آل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك موجبات رحمتك وإزاء مغفرتك والنجاة من النار ومن كل بلية والفوز بالجنة والرضوان في دار السلام وجوان نبيك محمد عليه وآله السلام. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمنك، لا إله إلا أنت، سبحانك إني كنت من أستغفر الله وأتوب إليه.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمد رسول الله، أشهد أن محمد رسول الله، أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، وأشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وأولاده المعصومين بالحق حجاج الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يستر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم إني أسألك الراحة عند الموت والعفو عند الحساب. الله أكبر. الحمد لله وخير الأسماء لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي، وإنما أطلبه بقطرات تقطر على قلبي، فأعجول في طلبه البلدان، فأنا في معنى طالب كالحيران، لا أدري أم في صخر أم في جبل أم في أذن أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر، وعلى يدي من قبل من، وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك، وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك. اللهم فصل على محمد وآله، واجعل يا رب الرزق قلي واسعة، ومطلبه سهلة، ومأخذه قريبة، ولا تعنني بسلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله، وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا نبي الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين وسيد الوصيين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين: علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، ومحمد بن علي الباقر، وجعفر بن محمد الصادق، وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم، وعلي بن موسى الرضا، ومحمد بن علي الجواد، وعلي بن محمد الهادي، وحسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن، يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك، وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا، ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكرى وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين. واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم 2 فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغن عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها هبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملت أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسله منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يهسمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لتمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره ننكس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وذللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مخذرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم. سورة الفاتحة for Aijaz, Hussain, Mir and كل مرهومين. الفاتحة.
Can we have another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajhum. Aijaz uncle's grandson Ali will now give a short speech. If you can welcome with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Firstly, a thank you to everyone who has attended today, and especially to the Hyderi team who organized and executed my grandfather Aijaz Hussain Mir's janaza and burial. My family and I are eternally grateful. The right of your father is that you should know that he is your root and you are his branch, and without him you would not be. Wherever you see anything in yourself which pleases you, you should know that your father is the root of its blessing upon you. This is a quote by Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. My grandfather was a man of passion. What drove that passion was his unfaltering love for the Ahlul Bayt. This passion translated into his sons, daughters and grandchildren, if not everyone around him. And as I mentioned from the previous saying for Imam Sajjad, we give him to thank for that love. He has left us all heartbroken, and his presence in our lives has left an enormous void. However, with his departure, we have never been more proud of him. I want to thank him for inspiring us and many others with the love of ziyarah. Despite his many health challenges, he was adamant to never miss the annual visitation. It is also narrated that as soon as you become a zawar of Imam Hussain, 4,000 angels will escort you to your home and they will never leave you. They will always be with you until the moment you die, to which they will walk behind your janazah. They will continue to do istighfar for you until the day of judgment. You are then greeted by Fatima az-Zahra. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the one that gives salams to you. Before you can even say salam alaikum to the Prophet, he tells you, you are my beloved. You're here to visit Hussain. Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Imagine Rasulullah saying salam to you. This brings me ease in light of my grandfather's death, knowing he finally meets the ones he loved the most. During the challenging time when my grandfather was in hospital, all I could think about was the blessings of Allah upon him even in death. Being a zawar of Imam Hussain, Allah cannot let you leave this world without a bestowal of His rahmah, His mercy. It was beyond words how difficult it was for me to see my grandfather in hospital and suffering. It made me think, what was it that Imam Sajjad was saying when he went to bury his father? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed my grandfather to complete his last ziyarah just weeks before he returned to his Lord, and allowed him to leave this dunya with the final words being, Ya Ali. May my grandfather be receiving the blessings of the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I pray we, as your family, will continue to make you proud and uphold your legacy of visitation of our masters on your behalf. Thank you to each and every one of you for all of your amazing support to my family, all the stories and messages we have received about his altruism and acts of service to his community members and beyond. I keep on hearing from people saying to me how great my grandfather was and how he inspired them during ziyarah, which only makes me happier that he spent his time here in remembrance of the Ahlul Bayt. However, saddens me that I cannot keep experiencing his love and warmth. Thank you, and please recite Surah Al-Fatiha in honor of both of my grandfathers who have left this world, Aijaz and Wazir Ali, and all the Marhumeen for everybody here. But before that, allow us for your salawat.
मरहूम एजाज मीर और तमाम मरहूमीन की बुलंदी दर्जात के लिए बावाज़ बुलंद सलावत। मौत अल्लाह से मुलाकात का एक बेहतरीन जरिया है। मौत अल्लाह से मुलाकात का एक बेहतरीन जरिया है। सारे पर्दे हट जाएंगे और अल्लाह की कुदरत का नजारा करने का बेहतरीन जरिया है। सारे पर्दे हट जाएंगे और अल्लाह की कुदरत का नजारा करने का बेहतरीन जरिया है। अरे आइम्मे मासूमीन की हूबहू ज़ियारत करने का जरिया है। आइम्मे मासूमीन अलैहिस्सलाम की हूबहू ज़ियारत करने का जरिया है। और सिब्ते जाफर के कलाम के मुताबिक तो अली से मुलाकात का जरिया है। सिब्ते जाफर के कलाम के मुताबिक तो अली से मुलाकात का जरिया है। बरअज़मत अली इब्न अबी तालिब अलैहिस्सलाम बावाज़े बुलंद सलावत।
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajahum. If we can begin by reciting other salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad and move closer to the front so as people are coming, inshallah, we don't disturb the majlis. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Salli ala Muhammad. As close as we can come, please, brothers. Thank you very much. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. May Allah have mercy on those of you who recite Surah Fatiha for the soul of Marhum Aijaz Hussain Mir, as well as your Marhumeen, our Marhumeen, the Marhum father of our brother Ayub, and all other Marhumeen of those gathered here and those who are part of this community. Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين مولانا أبو القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، قال إمام السجاد زين العابدين علي بن الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام في كتاب صلى على محمد وآل محمد في كتاب رسالة الحقوق. The right of your father is that you know that he is your root. Without him you would not be. Whenever you see anything in yourself which pleases you, know that your father is the root of that blessing. So praise Allah and thank Him in that measure, for there is no strength despite Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's really apt and beautiful that totally by chance Ali, in remembering his grandfather, has chosen to talk about Risalat al-Hukuk and talk about what Imam Sajjad has said in regards to the rights of your father. Those of you who have heard me speak about Risalat al-Hukuk before know very well that it's a book that is authored by Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam. And is one of the best ways in which we can open the doors of our path, our madhab, the madhab of Ali Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, to the masses, be that within the Muslim community or within the wider communities in which we work, we live, etc. It's a great piece for those who are at school, for those who work, to take with you wherever you go, because it's so accessible for everyone. And it's very straightforward and simple in the fact that it's simple not in what it's being said, but in the way that it's being said. Because each of those huquq, each of the rights that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam touches on are very short segments that we can take away in our lives. You can download it as an app, you can get it on PDF. It's very, very easy to pick up and start to read. And the beauty is that through that we can show people what the true meaning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and what the true meaning of Islam is. Because Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, when he comes to write and starts to give the narrations which are contained within Risalat al-Huquq, you find that it's a time in his life when he's witnessed mankind at their worst. In Karbala, you don't just see people who are evil, you see people who are at their absolute worst. How? Because they're ready to kill children, they're ready to behead children, they're ready to attack women. You see people who have no idea of what morality is, no ethical compass, no right or wrong. After that, amongst a number of things, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam sees that one of the things that needs to be addressed is to bring people back to humanity. And one of the ways that the Imam alayhi salam does that is through Risalat al-Huquq. And that's why it's always something that we encourage. You'll see many of the scholars encourage people to read, to interact with, to engage with, for many reasons. And the beauty is that in such few words, in such few sentences, our Aimma alayhimus salam are able to impart wisdom beyond our understanding. Forget every word, every sentence, every letter the Imam utters is something that is wisdom for you and for me. Anything that comes from our Imams alayhi salam, or from the Holy Family, or from the Prophets, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon them, for us is guidance. And we know, of course, for them is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're not belittling it, but nonetheless, it's very accessible for all of us to understand. And within that, of course, today, as we gather to remember a father, and we gather to remember someone who was known as the Zair of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, we gather to remember someone who has left a legacy. It was appropriate for us to begin at this point, for we inshallah pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that his name will be remembered for a long time to come. And for his family and for his sons and his daughters and his grandchildren, it's especially appropriate that we look at this ayat briefly. I did say to Asad at length that we have, of course, Maulana Sayyid Ali Abbas Razawi gracing us in a moment, inshallah, and that for me it's an honor to listen to him, but Asad insisted that I share a few words with you. I was blessed to have gone on ziyarah almost every year for the last 7 years with Asad and his father. And it's from that ziyarah that we came to know one another. It's in that path of the love and ishq of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam that we were brought together, and as a result it was a blessing for me, Asad, for you to ask for us to be here with you tonight. And inshallah a few words and we will take your permission. If you recite Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You find one of the most interesting conversations that takes place today in 2023, and many people want to explore and understand, is how can we live as long as possible? Everyone wants to extend their lives, be in this earth, spend as much time as they can in this realm, and delay their end, delay their death, whatever your belief may be, Muslim, non-Muslim, delay that end period as long as possible. And what I want to suggest tonight is that something that Aijaz uncle has already done, and as a result of which his name will be remembered for far longer than anyone else's and far longer than many others, is an act that we can do and we can all partake in to ensure that actually our legacies do extend far beyond our lifetimes, and our remembrance does extend far beyond. Because the reality is, as Muslims, we should look towards the likes of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala. When he has narrations in which he says things like he is more aware of death and more nearer to death and more fond of death than a child is of its mother. That should be our relationship with death. We shouldn't be afraid of death. Death shouldn't be a topic that we only ever discuss on a Chalis phone, we only ever discuss on a Soya Majlis or a Bursi Majlis. We should be talking about death because it is something that will happen to each and every one of us. Whether or not we are young, old, whether or not we are healthy or we are unfortunately not well and not in good health, death will come upon every one of us. The last 3 years have taught us that the reality is actually some of us may not even be expecting it, but it can knock on our door before it can even be coming. Further than that, we know that that for us as lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our ultimate abode isn't here. It's not this short world, however long or short that may be. Our ultimate abode is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's where we aim to go towards. So for us as Muslims, it's not the right way for us to approach it from the offset. But nonetheless, we look at that concept of lengthening your remembrance rather than lengthening your life. And within that, there is no better act than being within the servants of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam. Being known as a khadim of Abu Abdullah, and that khidmah can take many forms. Being known as a zakir of Abu Abdullah, and again that zakir can take many forms. Being known as someone who is a zawar of Abu Abdullah. These are all ways in which you can connect yourself to the ship of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. That ship, that Safinatul Najat, which you say is the fastest of ships. Ala Muhammad later would say that we all are forms of Najat, we're all forms of taking you to salvation. But the fastest way to reach that salvation is through the path of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So by combining yourself and joining yourself to that ship of Abu Abdullah, in whichever way you do, you'll see that actually all of a sudden you beat that lifelong question of how do I remain relevant to the people that are to come after me. And there are people in our communities, many of you will know, who are either in one way or another known because of their service to Abu Abdullah. Their names would have died many years ago, but they're remembered till today. Why? Because they were known as people who would attend the Majlis of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They were known as people who would sit in the front lines, people who would cry loudly. Today it's a shame, many of us find it embarrassing, whereas our ulama and the Ahlul Bayt ﷺ teach us that actually when you cry for Hussain ibn Ali ﷺ, cry in the way a child cries for its mother. Cry with your head raised, cry and scream out for Abu Abdullah. Imam Zaman ﷺ in his Allahumma salli ala Muhammad Ziyarat al-Nahiya, he sends his salam on those screaming voices, not just the crying voices, not just in the voices which are saddened by the death of Abu Abdullah, but he says in the voices that cry out because of the death of Abu Abdullah. So in all of these things, you know, people are remembered in that way. People are remembered because they had various forms of khidmah towards the minabar and the majlis of Abu Abdullah. People who may be known as people who served niyaz, people who cooked niyaz, people who established majalis. There are certain majalis in centers and in houses, whether you look here in the UK or you look back in Pakistan, which for generations are famous because of a certain individual having established that majlis and their family carrying it on and always remembering them. Likewise, ziyarat of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam is one of the greatest ways to forever tie your name to Abu Abdullah. And Uncle Aijaz was a person who not only was known as a zair, and I witnessed with my own eyes how he was someone who truly had love for that ziyarat. In 2020, when the borders shut and the planes were grounded and we were all stuck here for Marhum, there was a core group of people who until the day of Ashura tried anything and everything to try and make their way to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Even if that meant spending thousands of pounds, even if that meant going in very untraditional ways, 20-hour, 30-hour flights, even if that meant being extremely uncomfortable in the journey or in the hotel, just whatever. As long as we reached Karbala, we would have been satisfied. Some of them did, some of them didn't. But Uncle Aijaz was one of those who tried very hard on that year and in every year, whether his health was with him or his health was a challenge, he would always prioritize the ziyarat of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. And for us, there's a great lesson in that. Because ziyarat al-Hussain alayhi salam is a cure for many things, be them social, be them health, be they physical, be they unseen. Very often when people ask our scholars and our ulama, what's the advice in terms of the children especially? How can we correct the path of our children? How can we better their lives, especially in a society now where things are getting more and more challenging? The advice many of our ulama and many of our scholars will give them is actually, you know what, take them for ziyarat al-Hussain alayhi salam. Make them lovers of the ziyarat of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. Because you'll see as those children grow, they grow their entire lives having that connection. And they grow their entire lives waiting for that ziyarah and in putting everything into the context of that ziyarah. So within that, as the family of Uncle Aijaz, as his children and grandchildren and the legacies to come, one very important thing that you can do is continue in his service of Zawar. He was one of the first people in the UK to start taking Zaireen, and it's something that he would continue in one way or another, either taking or helping with or being a Zair himself until literally weeks before his death. throughout his life, it was something he did. It's something that we can all, not just his family, but all of us can try and partake in. Take people for ziyarat, help people. Be that as either someone who helps facilitate in the way that Uncle Aijaz did in terms of helping arrange for a package in a hotel, etc., etc., etc. Or if that's not for you, because that's not for everyone, that's not easy, that's difficult, then if you can spare some money and take someone or pay for someone to go for the ziyarat of Imam Hussain Islam and ask them when they go to pray for you. Because believe me, that dua, especially for someone who hasn't been able to go for ziyarat before, who goes because of your help and the intercession of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam for them to go through you, believe me, the du'as that they will do for you are du'as that are uncomparable to anyone else. And it all brings us back to the remembrance of the Father. That in many ways, as your life will continue, there will be things, as Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam beautifully says, there will be many things that will happen in your life. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. There will be many things that will happen in your life which will bring you pride and joy. And always remember your father in those moments. Because unfortunately today in society, sometimes fathers are left behind. Sometimes fathers are forgotten about. Sometimes you'll find in the case of where we have a Fatgi, where we have a Marhum, that for a few years there's a Barsi Majlis, then all of a sudden, sorry, that disappears. Before you know it, the family isn't even remembering them in their Fatihas, the family has just moved on. And that's a shame, it breaks our hearts. Because that's not what Ali Muhammad taught us. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, who we already said, his every recite Salawat al-Muhammad wa Muhammad. Recite another Salawat al-Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. So we already said his words are hikmat. His words, his every letter for us are knowledge and guidance. So when he is saying to us that in every moment of your life, without him, remember, you would not be. Without your fathers, without our fathers, we cannot be. And it's beautiful, not for tonight, but maybe another occasion, if you read this particular section of Risalat al-Hukuk in conjunction with what Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says about mothers, it will bring you a real understanding of what a sacrifice parents give for their children. Where the Imam says, without him, you would not be. And whenever you see anything in yourself which brings you pleasure, so whenever you feel, actually, I've done something good. This isn't even when other people tell you, well done, when other people recognize you for what you've achieved, when other people lift your name for the things you're doing, remember your father. But in particular, when you yourself feel that pleasure and pride, when you yourself recognize that actually today I've done something that has brought me a lot of pleasure, that has brought me a lot of satisfaction. Be that taking someone for ziyarah, be that achieving something in your lives, be that achieving something in your business, something in your worldly life, be that achieving something in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it could be you've bettered your relationship with Allah, you've bettered your relationship with the Quran, you've bettered your relationship with your namaz, you've bettered your relationship with the other wajibat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In that moment when you have pleasure of your own achievement, remember your father. Because you would not have reached that position were it not for what your father had done for you before. Allah again reminds us that all praise is for him, and without him there would be no other strength. Without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recite salawat al-Muhammad wa al-Muhammad. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam has left us many things. One is Risalat al-Hukuk, and the other is, of course, the Sahifa of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Again, where he leaves many beautiful du'as and munajat that we can connect with and throughout the year. It's a shame very often that these are things that we haven't necessarily had the same level of reverence for and had the same relationship with that we maybe have with other items in the religion, but it's something that we can inshallah work to improve on, and inshallah we can work to ensure that in years to come we're better on. And these are two very interesting approaches, because the Imam finds himself in a period when, due to the oppression and the zulm of Bani Umayyah al-La'in, the Imam is not necessarily able to spread the religion in the way that others are able to spread the religion after him. He's not necessarily able to address the people in the way that they were addressed before him. So he has to, as we said, understand the context which he finds himself in. And he focuses, amongst other things, as we said, on the rights because of what he saw amongst the people, and spirituality through Sahifa Sajadiyah, in which you will find du'as for every occasion. And these are du'as which we should make sure we are reading and reciting, and our children are reading and reciting, because they can truly provide a lot of comfort and solace in times of difficulty, as well as provide us that pleasure in times of happiness. For we have du'as in the Sahifa for the sighting of the new moon. We have du'as for the first of Ramadan, for the end of the month of Shahr Ramadan. We have du'as for when you are in happiness and when you want to give thanks to Allah, but also du'as for when you're struggling, for when something has made your life difficult, when you have anxiety, for when you have other difficulties. The Imams ﷺ have left us an entire legacy from which whatever we find ourselves in, there's always an answer through the path of Ali Muhammad ﷺ. And that truly for us is the message that I want us to take away and leave with, is that whenever there is difficulty, whenever there is a moment in which you need to reconnect, remember Ali Muhammad ﷺ. Because Ali Muhammad have taught us, and we saw through their lives, that they would always remember their times of happiness and their times of difficulty as a moment in which they would bring solace to one another. And there is one person within the path of Ali Muhammad ﷺ that I know Asad talking mentioned to me his father had a particular love for and a particular connection with, and that's Mawla Ghazi Abbas ﷺ. Recite Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And what you'll find in the beauty of Mawla Abbas ﷺ is that he is someone who spends his entire life doing everything that we just described. He was the ultimate Khadim of Hussain ﷺ. He was the ultimate giver in the way of Abu Abdullah ﷺ. To the extent that anything Abu Abdullah wanted for his whole life, Mawla Abbas would make it his mission that I will do whatever you need me to do, my master. That starts from where? It starts from his mother, Baneen, when she enters the house. When you see the way in which she comes into that house, you understand where Mawla Abbas comes from. You understand what makes Abbas when you look towards the mother. And that's because she enters the house, her name is Fatima, and she says to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen when she sees the way in which the children react to her name, she says to the Imam, can you give me another name? Why? Because she says, I see every time you mention the name of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi, when you call me Fatima, the children have hurt in their eyes. They have difficulty. Imagine that service of the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi. She says, I would not want that I, a servant in the household of Ali Muhammad, cause any pain to the children of Fatima alayhi. So give me another name. And that's where the famous name and title of Baneen comes from. And from that you then see Baneen, her whole life would teach Mawla Abbas alayhi, Abbas, you are the son of Baneen and they are the sons of Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha. They are above you. You are not the son of Fatima. You are not the same as them. You may be from living in the same household. You may grow up alongside them, but they will always be your masters and you will always be their servants. There's a famous moment in one of the battles of Islam. Some narrate this to Hazrat Muhammad Hanafi alayhi salam, others narrated to Mawla Ghazi Abbas alayhi salam, in which they say that Imam Hussain and Hussain alayhi salam are standing with their father Amir al-Mu'mineen in the middle, and the sons are fighting, either Mawla Abbas or Hazrat Muhammad. And as they're fighting, the enemies begin to taunt them. They say to them that, look, clearly your father doesn't have that much love for you because he sent you out here. He sent you to fight and be in danger, whereas you see that your brothers, the sons of Amir al-Mu'mineen are at safety. They're back in the tents. They're safe. They're not in any danger. So the son comes back. He says to the father, he says, Father, this is what they've said to me. What should I respond? And there's a beauty in that as well, because they could have responded. Mawla Abbas could have responded at that moment. But no, he goes back to Amir al-Mu'mineen because he won't talk before Amir al-Mu'mineen talks. He goes back, he says, he listens to his father, he goes back to the enemy. He says, know this. They are the sons of Muhammad and I am the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And it's the job of the sons of Amir al-Mu'mineen to protect the sons of Muhammad. And they are like the eyes of the body and I am like the hands of the body. And it's the job of the hands of the body to protect the eyes, because when the eyes are attacked, the hands come up to protect them. And that is when you begin to understand what Mawla Abbas was. So then on a day of Ashura, and Sayyid is here now, so just a few minutes of Masayib, and inshallah I'll take your permission. That's why when on the day of Ashura, when you see when Mawla Abbas time and time again would come towards his brother, that his brother would cry and weep, saying, how can I give you permission? Because my whole life you have been there as my backbone. How now can I give you permission? There's one particular part of the Masayib that breaks my heart, and it's narrated to us by one of the khuddam of the haram of Mawla Abbas alayhi salam. He says, I went to clean the grave of Mawla Abbas alayhi salam. And when I went in, I said to the other khadim, I said, this is so strange. Why? Because my whole life I had heard Mullah Abbas was so tall when he would sit on a horse, his feet would drag on the ground. Why is it then that when I look at the grave, this grave is so small? That Khadim says, that night I went to sleep, and as I was in my sleep, our master Zahra salamullahi alayha came to me. And she said to me, oh man, never say this again. Why? Because you have broken my heart. He says, forgive me, what is it about what I said that broke your heart? She said, did you know my son was so tall, but as he was lying on the plains of Karbala, someone took a sword and would cut at his body. Whoever didn't have a sword would throw spears. If they didn't have spears, they would throw stones and the sand of Karbala, until what you see left of my son is what was left and buried by Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam. And she says, oh man, one more thing. What? She says, when you recite his masaib, remember his most hard masaib. He says, which masaib is that? She says, those hands. Because when you fall, oh man, what do? You put your hands out in front of you. I said to you, my son was so tall, when he would ride, his feet would drag in the sand. Tell me what became of him as he fell with no hands and an arrow in the eye. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Assalamu alladhi dhalamu ala Muhammadin. Ayya munqalibin yanqalibun. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the marhum with the tears shed in the way of Ali Muhammad alayhi salam, with the sawab of this majlis and the sawab that everything that his family is doing for him. And inshallah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give patience to his family and assist him in this difficult time. The family have asked me to introduce my teacher, my Ustad, Hyderi Abbas Razawi, before he comes to the mimbar. It's an honor for me to call myself a student of the Sayyid. It's a blessing and a challenge for him to be sitting and listening. It makes it a lot harder. But know this, that Hyderi Abbas Razawi is known for many things, be it being the first ever chief imam of any Western country, for his roles within many other things. But amongst them, I think the greatest blessing for him is he's known as a khadim of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam and a khadim of the minabar of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. So with that, with a loud salawat, welcome the khadim of Abu Abdullah, Hyderi Abbas Razawi. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Jawab do please. Narae takbir. Narae risalat. Nara Hyderi. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad bawaz buland salawat. आपकी इजाजत से मरहूम बहुत ही मोहब्बत करते थे अबा अब्दुल्लाह हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम को, वो सब आपने मिंबर से सुना। मेरी भी मरहूम से काफ़ी इस मामले में बातें होती थी। मैं चार मिसरे कहे बगैर रह नहीं सकता ज़ाहिर हुसैन की अजमत के हवाले से। मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद बावाज़ बुलंद सल्लल्लाहु ज़ाहिर हुसैन की अजमतों का इस दुनिया में कोई मोल लगा ही नहीं सकता। ज़ाहिर हुसैन once again I am saying, ज़ाहिर हुसैन की अजमतों का मोल इस दुनिया में कोई लगा ही नहीं सकता। जो इस्तेताअत रखते हैं ज़ियारत की और ना जाए, उसको कोई समझा नहीं सकता।
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم رجسه وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Just before me, you've heard some very beautiful points in relation to fatherhood, in relation to Ahlul Bayt. Each one of us are here to give our condolences in many ways to a person who was a Za'ir of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Za'ir of Sayyid al-Shuhada has a maqam that you and I won't understand until that moment comes when Malakul Maut comes to us. Look, everyone sitting here eventually is going to leave this world. Most of us sitting here just scanning the room have seen most of our life. 50% of our life is gone. If you think you're going to see another 30 years, most of you won't. And 30 years goes very fast. Most of you, in fact, may not see the next 20 years. What does that tell you? That tells you death is a haqiqah, it's a reality. And each one of us are going in that direction. Either you're going to be chucking dirt on my face tomorrow, or I'm going to be chucking dirt on your face. But that's the stark reality. That a time is going to come. If you're lucky, you'll have your children around you. If you're lucky, you'll be lying there in peace. Some of us won't have that. You've seen in COVID, people died without their children, lonely. And at that moment, if you're lucky, you'll be there. But know one thing, Malakul Maut is going to come to you. And that's a haqiqah. You'll be seeing Malakul Maut. Very quickly, before you realize, you'll be seeing Malakul Maut. And as you see Malakul Maut, he's going to come for you. And when he does, if you weren't going to die, you would have died just by seeing him. And that palpitation and the sweat on your brow. Here the sixth Imam alayhi salam says, he says there's two types of people in this situation. One, when Malakul Maut grabs their soul, they're fighting with it. I've seen myself, a person over a week to 2 weeks is fighting. You can see the skin color getting yellow. Meat is moving from his face, shrinking, body is, and he's fighting. Another type of person, his soul goes lightly and it disappears. Somebody asked the Imam, he says, what's the difference between these two people? You know what the reply was? Imam gives a story as a reply. He says, imagine, for example, that you've washed your clothes. In the olden days, the way they washed their clothes, they'd put it either on a tree, on a bush, and so forth, on the floor. So imagine a person who comes, he puts all these pieces of cloth everywhere, and then rain comes. What do? Torrential rain. Whoever the cloth is, you grab it. That one on a thorny bush starts ripping. Imam turns around and he says, those are the attachments to the world that you have. Now look, attachments to the world are not just your car and your children. Part of the nafs of a human being also is this, and bear this in mind. It's how your relationship is with your parents. How a relationship a father is with a son, and a son is with a father. So just to carry on with a couple of things, then I'll move on to what I wanted to say. Look, in this day and age, in the 21st century, you find probably more madhloom than a mother as a father. Because as you're seeing families split up and divide, children these days give less attention to their fathers, not realizing that both mother and father are important. Look, your risk is to do with your parents. Your health is to do with your parents. Your long life is to do with your parents. Even if your mother and father are mushrik, fasik, fajr, whatever they may be. But we have multiple traditions on this, that Allah restricts a person's risk and destroys the life of a person if that person doesn't have a good relationship with their parents. And that's something that we forget. However muqaddas you become, however religious you become, if you're not acting like Amir al-Mu'mineen, then you're not a Shia. Acting is not just loving the name of Ali. It's to understand Ali and embody Ali in your heart. By embodying Ali in your heart, you become Isma Adam as well. Right? You've not understood what I've said, so I'll explain to you. Ali al-Lisani is one thing. From the lisan, from the tongue, it goes into the heart. This is why they say, do kathrat al-zikr. There's a sir behind, there's a secret behind why the Prophet says, say, Ya Ali. Ya Ali, Ya Ali, Ya Ali begins on the tongue, ends in the heart. When it ends in the heart, that Isma Adam, all the names of Allah expand in your heart. Look, I'll give you an example. There's a name of Allah called Al-Ali. That's a sifat though, sifat of Allah, right? You can say Al-Ali, you're appealing to a sifat. When you say Ya Ali, the person, Ali is madhar al-ajaib. All of the asman sifat of Allah come through Ali. So when you say Ya Ali, you feel it inside of you that there's a difference. Right? Everyone here felt that. You know why? Kulle asman sifat of Allah is in that. Now imagine from the lips, it goes into the heart. When it goes into the heart, insan's character begins to change as well. This is why they call it kimia. Ishq Ali is kimia. Why? Because it makes a character of a person different. I'll come on to this later. Let me come on to the point that I was saying. The fact of the matter is this, that we have a responsibility to both of our parents. If you don't fulfill that responsibility, la'an of Allah is with you. And wherever you're walking, la'an is there. If you ever have a friend whose parents are not happy with him, either convince him or move away from him. Because you'll find restriction of rahman on you as well. There's an overflow. It destroys an entire majlis. If a person who's aqd walidain, as they say, walk over here, you'll see that it ruins the entire spirituality. Why does that happen? And it says even if a person's father is a fasiq or a mother is a fasiq and a fajr. I'll give you an example. A person comes to one of the great scholars at the time in Najaf. He says, look, my risk is so constricted, I've not found a way out. So he goes everywhere, finally comes to Najaf, comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen. After that he's going out. As you see the wali, awliya of Amir al-Mu'mineen stood in the haram. He sees a man, Nurani man, he goes up to him and he asks him a question. He says to him, give me something that's going to help me because I have restriction of risk. At the time was a very big marja was sitting there. He looks up and he says, listen son, before I give you something, because I can see you've been to everyone, let me ask you a couple of questions. Is there haqqun nas on your shoulders? He says, no. He says, are you okay with your relatives? He says, yes. He says, have you taken somebody's haqq? He says, no. He says, how you like with your mother and father? He thinks about it. He says, I'm okay. He says, no, think. Then he remembers. He says, yes, there was a time that an ikhtilaf took place between my wife and my mother. He says, I knew my mother was wrong. In front of my wife, I told her she was wrong. Now listen, both mother and wife have haqq over you, in the way that a husband and a father has haqq over you. At that moment, this ayatullah replies, message is coming from Amir al-Mu'mineen. Turns around and he says, the reason why Allah has restricted your risk is because your mother's not happy with you. Even if she was wrong, you opened your mouth and embarrassed her in front of her daughter-in-law. He says, what do I do? He says, I want you to get up, go, kiss your mother's feet, ask her for forgiveness. So he went, called his mother, kissed her on the feet. Says, mother, forgive me. She says, now I forgive you. Not apologizing right after the incident. You disgraced me in front of my daughter-in-law, right? This principle also applies to your father as well. If you raise your voice in front of your father and it breaks his heart, Allah will give you torment in this world. Either your risk will be restricted, either your business will start failing, either your health will, or your own children will be deprived from you. So look, bear this in mind. Why do I say this? Because all over London you're seeing broken families. All over London. Everywhere you see disrespect, especially in the social media period. Children raising their voices in front of their parents. We weren't able to raise our voices. And these kids today, 1,000,001, raising their voices. You could turn around to me and say, but my father's oppressive. Fine, I'm not saying be his best friend. My mother's oppressive. Fine, I'm not saying be a best friend. What I'm saying though is when you go there, go with a smile. Don't raise your voice. Do good to her. A man comes to the 6th Imam, comes into Medina, walks in. He says, give me some nasiyat. Ask the Imam. Imam says, is your mother alive? He says, yes. He says, I want you to go and feed your mother with your own hands. He says, my mother's a Christian. He says, so what? Does she serve pork? He says, no. If she doesn't go, eat with her. Put morsels in her mouth. Be good to her. Respect her. So he goes back to Kufa. Story says that all of a sudden his character changes. So she comes to him and she asks him. She says, ever since you've come back from Medina, all of a sudden your character's become so good. You're helping me. What's the story behind it? He says, I went to my Imam. She says, you sure he's an Imam? Because this is the work of a prophet. This is a work of only a prophet teaches these things. She said, no, it's the Imam. He says, what does an Imam mean? He says, he's not a prophet, he's the son of the prophet. She says, that means you're religious on haqq. She changed, she died on the haqq. Why? This is called tabligh. So listen, be very vigilant. Because you only appreciate your parents when they've gone. There's many people here, backbenchers especially. Do you know that even after your parents' death, they can still disown you? Do you know that? Even if you think that you put them in the grave, on the Day of Judgment, Hadith says, a person's going to rise, he's going to realize, my parents have disowned me. Says, Ya Allah, I was good to them, put them in the grave and everything. Says, you were, but after that you forgot. What's the haqq after that? You see, you can always redeem yourself, by the way. If in this lifetime there's a problem, after their death, redeem yourself when it comes to your parents. How's that possible? There's a number of ways. Let's look at it now. One of the biggest ways is what we're in today. Ayatollah Marashi al-Najafi, who did ziyarah of Imam al-Zaman more than one time. And today if that tradition is that in Fatimiyya, all of us go to Qum, is because of Marashi al-Najafi. Why do you think everyone is going to Qum to celebrate Fatimiyya, to commemorate Fatimiyya? Because of Marashi al-Najafi. When he saw in a vision Hazrat Zahra, he asks her, he says, I want to know where your grave is. She says, you can't know where my grave is until he comes. But if you want, go to Masama Qum. So today, if you notice, everybody is there, from all over the world there. Why Marashi Najafi? That Marashi Najafi says to his son, writes a wasiyat. After doing all of that, dua of the Imam is with him, dua of Zahra is with him. But what does he say? He says, remember one thing, son. After I'm dead, as long as you're alive on a Thursday night, come to my grave, recite the Masaib of Hussain. So there's something special about this that you and I don't understand. There's a secret in Sayyid al-Shuhada that takes the heart onto Mi'raj. We don't even understand. Look, they said the Zawar of Imam Hussain, for every step, there's 1,000 Umrah thawab. Every step, 1,000 Hajj. You don't understand the Zawar of Imam Hussain, let alone Imam Hussain himself. Think about it. The steps that you take. At that moment, your steps become that. Me and you may be nothing, but the minute we become Za'ir Hussain, we become everything. The dirt from the shoes of Za'ir Hussain becomes shifa. You and I in our daily life is one thing. But for another person, when you begin to walk to Imam Hussain, you become something else. Why is that? Nisbat. That's what's the difference. Look, we're a religion that talks about nisbah. This alam next to me. This is shafa, if you understood what it was. Just now, recently, about a week and a half ago, I was in Toronto, the Afghan Center. In the morning, there was a line of women from the other denominations. All of them were there, line of them coming under the alam. So I asked the question. I said, you're not even Shia. Why do you come here? They said, we're from Kandahar. We're from Afghanistan. We've heard from our elders that when you can't have children, you come under the flag of Abdul Fadl Abbas. This woman was standing there with a child in her hand. She says, I came last year. And today Shias are discussing azamat of the flag of Abbas. Look, you can't understand Abbas. Understand his flag. Understand the nisbah of his flag. Right? Just not, all of these trips that you go, one of the things that Allah has given us is that we travel, so you see it. I still remember in Dar es Salaam just this year, 9th of Marhum, there was a Hindu come under the flag of Abbas. So why have you coming? He says, oh, we're Rajputs. Our elders have told us when there's a Hajjah, come under the flag of Abbas. You've been given all of this, but we haven't understood what it is. If there's no nisbah, this is just a cloth. When the nisbah comes, this cloth becomes muqaddas. Right? Why is that? Because you're giving Hussain, Azamat Hussain, afdaliyat. Right? You have to understand these things. So imagine what Hussain ibn Ali himself is, that you and I haven't understood. And why haven't we understood? Because his heart's not pure. If the heart's pure enough, then you only understand it. Otherwise, you won't do. Standing outside, you won't do. Let me tell you something. Luckily, everybody's inside, but I'll tell you one thing. Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Hussain ibn Ali has both of these sifats as well. Rahmaniya brings you to a majlis. In the same way that Allah giving 8 billion people oxygen and everything else, that's the rahmah of Allah. Rahimiyya of Allah makes you what you are. Ulayta Ali. Rahmaniya brings you to a majlis. Rahimiyya gives you the ability to benefit from a majlis. What is the benefit of a majlis? Let me just explain it to you in one line. Benefit of a majlis is this: if you have the intention correct, ka'annahu, you're sitting under the dome of Imam Hussain, every dua is answered here. And today as you sit here, do you know how powerful this tear is that you shed in your eyes? If you knew how powerful it was, when all of you shed your tears, your marhum who's in his grave at this moment is going to pray for you. And today's children need that prayer more than anybody else. Why? Because those children have become yatim. Eventually all of you are going to be there. But remember this. Remember every Thursday, if you can't do anything for your father, just recite 2 lines of Masaib for Imam Hussain. Why? Nur will come of Sayyid al-Shuhada in the grave itself. Imam Hussain takes care of everything else. Otherwise, remember, your mother and father are going to say, wasn't I your good parents? At least we did something for you in your life. You know what we did? We could have been bad in everything, but there was one good thing that we did. We made you azadar of Imam Hussain. Right? So there's no ikhtilaf, tell me. For everything they could have done. Okay, let's say you can turn around to me and say, this is, in this day and age, so many children are complaining about their parents. You know what? The fact that you're sitting here, your parents did something correct. You could turn around to me and say, but my father was a Sunni, my mother was a Sunni, my mother was a Christian, my mother was a Jew, my mother was a Hindu. Doesn't matter. If their deenat is pure, that's why you're here today. Hussain looks above that. Hussain looks above that. Otherwise, he wouldn't make you his lover. That's why they say that whenever you feel ishq, thank your mothers, regardless of what background they're from. There was something pure about them that Sayyida Zainab brought you here. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the case. So look, bear this in mind. As you're here, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility needs to be fulfilled. If that responsibility isn't fulfilled, your marhum father, mother, whoever they may be, you don't want them to curse you. And this is why ulama have said, if ever you find that your life is going downhill, the best thing to do is this. Thursday, Dhuhr time, to Friday, Dhuhr time, that 24 hours, go to their grave, recite a Surah Yasin. Say to your parents, help me. Help me. You think that mother who raised you is not going to raise her hands and say, Allah, my son's in trouble, he's come to me? Allah loves a mother that much that even in their graves, their amal is closed, but they can pray for you. How wretched is that person who's left their parents like this in this life? This is why I say, if you see somebody who's had ikhtilaf with their parents, explain to them. And if you can't explain to them, distance yourself from them, because the la'nat of Allah is coming on them. And that la'an is going to come to you as well. It's like with anything. It's like when the sun comes, it's going to scorch you. When la'an comes, la'an is a restriction of rahmah. When that restriction of rahmah comes, what happens? You're moving away from the wilayah of Ahlul Bayt. Ahlul Bayt are not there with his la'an. Ahlul Bayt are there with his nur. And la'an is a restriction of nur. So look, carrying on the discussion, in essence, there's 3 or 4 things which are very important for you to remember, for me to remember as well. What can we do for our parents now that they've gone? I'll tell you the first thing. Simple as this. Simple as this. Plant a tree for them. Hadith says. As long as that person or that tree is benefiting people, there's no adhab qabr for your parents do dua for you. Second thing, dig a well. Look today, places like Pakistan, $900 you've got a well, an entire tribe can drink from there. Do you know how many people have become followers of Ahlul Bayt just because of water? And today, because of our neglect, how many of those tribes have gone back to the way of the Mukhalifin? Why is that? Water. Make a sabil for Sayyid al-Shuhada. Give people water. As long as their thirst is being quenched, you'll see people are... You see, look, our job is not... I'm not here to convert somebody. I'm here to give them the hadith of Ali Muhammad. They take care of everything. You take him to the door, the master takes care of everything yourself. Look, I'll give you an example. In the 1970s, there was a marja by the name of Sayyid Ahmad al-Khansari. Somebody comes to him. It's in Tehran. This is in 70s. This is a long time ago before the world was like this. They come to him and they say to him, they said, oh, look, my brother does every haram in the book. You got to give him nasiyat. He looks at him and he goes, listen, he's done every haram. Look, now you want me to say something? What am I going to do? Blow on him or something? He says, no, you've got to do something. So, puts his head down, raises it. He says, I've got a solution for you. If you can do this, I'll give him a nasiyat. He says, what is it? He says, can you take him to Karbala? He says, oh, this guy's not going to go to Shah Abdul Azim. You want me to take him to Karbala? He said, take him to Karbala. See what happens. He says, fine. So he comes to his brother. He says, look, why don't you go to Karbala? He says, listen, you guys go. What am I going to do? He said, let's go sightseeing at least. In those days, Iraq was quite beautiful in the 70s. He said, why don't we go sightseeing? I don't know, somehow they got him there. 3 days they were in Karbala. On the third day, he turns around and he says, look, you've been here for 3 days. Why don't you come just to give salam to Imam Hussain? He says, look, you know, man kuja, Hussain kuja. He says, just come. So he grabs him and he takes him. And in those days, Bain al-Haramain, if you notice how it was, there were trees in there, there were houses in there and everything else, so they weave. And in those days, there were no covering. This guy's looking everywhere. Comes next to the shrine. He's looking at the gold and the silver. Soon as he walks in, his brother says his head goes down, goes up to the zari, begins to cry. And as he begins to cry, brother comes, he says, brother, now that you're crying, just make an oath to Imam. You'll never go back to your past life. He comes back to Tehran, goes to Ahmad al-Khansari, says, oh, we got him to Imam Hussain. He says, bring him to me so I can give him a nasiyat. He says, I don't think it's necessary. Hussain ibn Ali is taking care of everything. Ya Ali. Look, that's the solution today. You know when people come and they say, our children are like this and like this and like this and like this and like, forget all of that. You can't sit on a minbar giving 300 lectures. You know why? Because it's not going to work, and it never works like this. Heart's not there. Heart's darkened. Who lightens the heart? Take him to Hussain ibn Ali. That's the solution. Otherwise, there is no solution. Opens the heart. Why? Look at Imam Hussain. You're friends of Imam Hussain. Khur came as his enemy. You know what Imam Hussain did? He looked deep in his heart. He saw there was some love for Zahra. Pulled it out. Had Hur repented for 1,000 years, Hur wouldn't have become alayhi salam. What did Imam Hussain? Look how Kareem Imam Hussain is. Who was Hur? Killer of everyone, basically. It's because of Hur that all of this happened. When Hur turns back, Imam Hussain accepts him. All of you here are lovers of Zahra. All of you here. Take him to Imam Hussain. See Sayyid al-Shuhada himself takes you towards. That's the only solution, otherwise you'll see. In this time of darkness, we're all going to be there. You're seeing it, corruption taking place. We're losing the pathway. Arrogance has taken over. Dunya has taken over. All of these problems. And Imam has said that. He says to Kumail, he says, Dhalala and dhulamat. Confusion and darkness is going to fall communities in the last days. And that's what's happening. How can you reverse that? Go back to Imam Hussain. Look, you feel it now. It's not about words. If you just for 1 second look into your own heart, just 1 second now, you'll feel the power and the energy of Imam Hussain. He's as alive today as he was 1400 years ago. That's what mawaddat is. You've not seen Hussain. You've not talked to him. You know, you love somebody who you interact with. You love your child because you've interacted. You love your parents because you've interacted. If I say great-grandfather, you've never seen him, you don't know him, you don't love him. He's your relative, yes, but you've never seen him. Hussain ibn Ali, all of you have something in your heart for him. That's what a miracle is. And that's what mawadda is. That's the difference between muhabba and mawadda. Right? A couple of days ago, we were here for Eid al-Zahra. In that Eid, I said something. Mawadda's first condition is tabarra and then tawalla. Otherwise, you can't gain maqam of mawadda. Muhabba is the other way around. Mawadda has to begin on tabarra. And this is why you have two Eids. This entire year began with Eid al-Zahra, tabarra first. It ends with Eid al-Ghadir, tawalla. Because this is the Tawheedi way. Tawheed begins with tabarra, la ilaha. And then it comes. Allah says, don't follow me until you've not negated everyone. Right? It's a very sensitive point. That's the point that we want to take you to. What does a majlis do? What the majlis does is it removes najasat of enemies of Ahlul Bayt. And it emphasizes the wilaya of Ahlul Bayt. You see this. Why do you cry over Imam Hussain? When you're crying over Imam Hussain, you're doing tabarra against his enemies. In effect, that's what you're doing. Ahlul Bayt don't need your tears. Why are they telling you cry? And then they say, cry louder. And cry louder. And then they turn around and they say, look how mazloom. Honestly, if you look at the mazloomiyat of Ahlul Bayt on this, on the 1st of Muharram, you recite this, right? Ibn Shabib says something to the Imam. Imam's talking to Ibn Shabib. Your 8th Imam says to Ibn Shabib, he says, even if you want to cry over yourself, just make the intention of crying over Hussain. How mazloom is Imam Hussain that we're not crying for Imam Hussain, we're crying over ourselves. And how kareem is Ahlul Bayt. If it was me and my son, I would have said, you're not crying over my son. Zahra doesn't even look at that, although she knows you're crying over yourself. She just says, make the intention, and we accept it. That's how kareem Ahlul Bayt is, but that's how mazloom Ahlul Bayt is as well. Look at the contradiction in that. They're kareem and they're mazloom. Mazloom because we're not crying over them, in effect. Kareem because they overlook all of our deficiencies. That's what an imam is. Imam overlooks the deficiencies of those people who follow him. Right? And that's why we go to the ziyarah of Imam Hussain. On 7 different maqamat, ziyarah of Ahlul Bayt will help you. But look, before I get on to that, 2-3 more things. Time is never on our side. 2-3 more things. We talked about death. You know, a person can die the death of a kafir, and bear this in mind, if there are 3 things that he does. Now that we're here, we'll mix fadail and tabligh together, because if it wasn't for the hadith of the Imam, I wouldn't say it. 3 things. If a person has, they're outside of the wilaya of Ahlul Bayt on their deathbed. You know the first thing is? First thing is this. If a person has jealousy in their heart, they're far away from the wilaya of Ahlul Bayt. Hadith says when they die the death of a kafir. I'll give you an example. Somebody buys a brand new car. And you're thinking to yourself, I wish I had that car. But when they crash it, you feel happy. Because they've gone back to now a lower level car. That's called jealousy. Somebody's child does better than yours. You forget Allah's raziq. Immediately you have jealousy. You mean bad for that person. If a person, and that destroys communities, by the way. If a person has that, believe me, on their deathbed, they'll die death of a kafir. First thing. Now, if I had time, I'd go into it, and we don't. Second thing is this. I bear this in mind as well. Second thing, intoxication. People say, this halal is haram, let's find a jawaz for this. Like, listen, I won't even take a risk. I wouldn't take the risk. Hadith says, intoxication, 40 days, your dua is not accepted. Outside the wilayat of the Imam. Why? Because Ayat Tathir says what? Ahlul Bayt are purified from rijs, and you've just embodied rijs in yourself. So if you die, what happens? Lutf of Ahlul Bayt is off you. Why? Rijs can't come. Taharat and rijs don't unite in one place. Right? So bear this in mind. Secondly, some people say, is this halal? Look, don't cheat yourself. Think about it. Do you want Amir al-Mu'mineen to come or not? If Amir al-Mu'mineen is standing there, are you going to tank yourself up on drugs or not? You're not going to, are you? Just always make that milak. He's watching. Ashik of Ali only does what Ali does. You see, if you go and look at the traditions and see, Mitham al-Tammar used to swim in the ishq of Amir al-Mu'mineen. When he was hanged, they say, when he was hanged, right, hands were pinned on a tree, his daughter comes in the way. He says, get out of my way. Says, why, father? Says, I don't want to be distracted. I must in the ishq of Ali. Ishq of Ali removes the pain and suffering of death as well. But when Amir al-Mu'mineen comes into your life, then everything leaves your life then. That's what you want. That's what you want to remember. When ishq of Ali comes into your life, everything else does. Why is that? Because Rasulullah said the milak is not Rasulullah, it's Ali. Mizan is Ali. Look, very quickly let me prove that. Let me prove it to you. Biggest test for the angels and Adam is who? Adam, angel, shaitan. Where does shaitan fall? Allah says, bow to waliullah. What happens? Shaitan doesn't. Biggest test, waliullah. In every single time, the test has been the wali of Allah. Are you going to bow to the wali or you're not going to bow to the wali? Rasulullah doesn't say, I'm the biggest test. He says, Ali is the wali. That's the biggest test. There were munafiqeen around the Prophet. You saw that. Surah Munafiqeen is there. Tell me how many munafiqs were on Ali. Ali was Imam al-Muttaqeen. When you looked, you saw Salman, Abu Dhar, Miqdad. Ali's the mizan, pushes the munafiqeen away, brings the mu'mineen towards him. Right? So in every single era, the milak is wilayat of the wali. So in this time as well, the biggest test is the 12th Imam. Why? He's the wali of the time. In every time, the wali is the test. From Adam to Khatam, you'll see this. What does Rasulullah say? He doesn't say, I'm the test. He says, Ali's the test. Ali's the one. Qasimu jannati wan nar. Ali's the one who when you smile, you can find a munafiq from a mu'min. Ali's the one. What is it about Ali? Look, if I was saying this, it's not rhetoric what I'm saying. I'm not here for anything. I'm telling you what the truth is. The truth goes back to Ziyarat Rajabiyya. Look, today you can talk about hadith being fabricated, but the one thing that we know is not, is the ziyarat and the du'as of the Imam. Your Imam stands there in Ziyarat Rajabiyya. When he stands in front of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, Assalamu alayka ya wajhullah. He says, Salam who? Wajhullah. Why is Ali wajhullah for, right? Allah doesn't have a wajh. You know that. He doesn't have a face. Allah doesn't. But how do you know? Look, I know when you frown that you're upset. When you smile, you're happy. Right? When you're stressed, it shows on your face. All of your faces symbolize exactly what it is. So let me tell you something. How do you know when Allah is happy or sad? Allah doesn't have a face. You look at the face of Ali to know what the Mashiach of Allah is. So you see this is why it's important. Actualize that. You'll notice you become intoxicated. Why? When this stops, this begins. This needs to be there. When that's there, then your akhlaq, your prayer, everything comes into line again. Why is that? Now you're doing it from the wasil of nur. Ishq Ali gives nur. Otherwise, listen. You think shaitan wants you not to pray? Shaitan wants you to pray. You're telling me, how's that possible? Shaitan wants you to fast. Shaitan wants you to go to Hajj. Not that I had a meeting with Shaitan before I came here. Shaitan wants you to do all of these things. You know why? Because when a person does it, they're doing it in darkness. And if they're doing it in darkness, you find that they become even worse. Look at the Khawarij. Look, I'll give you an example of the Khawarij. You can turn around to me and say, we weren't at that time. What about Daesh? You know when they were slaughtering 13, 14-year-old children's necks? How are they able to do that? You and I can't do that. But they're praying more, they're fasting more, they're going Hajj more. They've done riyazat more. Therefore, their spiritual capacity to do that is widened. So you find that there's no raham in them. Why? There's no nur in them. This is where fasting and prayers become negative. But when you do it with the wilayat of and the nur of Ahlul Bayt, you see there's more. You become Rahman and Rahim and Kareem. When a person comes to you, then you'll never turn them away. The biggest sign of a follower of Ahlul Bayt is this: they never leave anyone to go empty-handed. If they come to you, you help them. And if you're not helping them, there's a problem. You could turn around to me and say, but I don't have any money. But you have something in your pocket, don't you? If a person's come for £100, you got 5, right? Give them that at least. The day you turn somebody away, know that you've turned away from that. You've turned, because why? Amir al-Mu'minin is that person. What does he say to Salman? Salman asks him a question. He says, Ya Ali, who's more sakhi? Who's more giving? You, Hatim at-Tai. Right? Have you seen stories of Hatim at-Tai? He'd have a house with 40 doors. They say when Hatim at-Tai died, his son said, I want to be like my father. Grandmother said, fine, try and be like your father. He sat there, knock on the door came. Hatim at-Tai, son covers his face, opens the door. There was a woman sitting there. Gives her the money. Next door, knock on the door, opens the door, same woman. You know what he says to her? He said, didn't I just give you on the first door? She replies, she says, is your father dead? He says, how do you know? Said, I'd go to 40 doors. Your father never turned me away. Amir al-Mu'minin says, Hatim at-Tai is giving. But if somebody comes to my door once, they don't need to go to any other door. That's the door that a person goes to when they have nothing left in their hand anymore. Condition is you've got to let everything go from your hands first. But that's where wealth is. Wealth lies on that door when everything else is gone. Remember this. Why only one door? Because you've got to close every other door. When the doors are closed, then there's only one door. Go and submit yourself to that door, and then you'll see everything comes to you. Nothing then remains. Everything comes to that person. So look, time is limited. The actual reason that we're here for is what? In essence, is to gladden the heart of Fatima. That's the only reason. And these tears will benefit the Marhum, who himself was a Matami, who himself was a Za'ir of Imam. Imam doesn't call a person to him unless if there's a quality in them that he likes. And if he calls you continuously, there's something positive about you. You may not know it yourself. You may not know it yourself. You may not see it yourself. But it's there. How wretched is the person who comes to a majlis and doesn't have the tawfiq to cry over Imam Hussain. Why? Shifa is now. Hajat is here. Allah will give you if you come to this door. Look, let me narrate to you a story, then we move into it. About 16, 17 years ago or so. Chris, add a salawat, please. 16, 17 years ago, there's a city in India by the name of Jaunpur. Right. There used to be a woman there. On the 6th of Marhum, a julus comes from Jaunpur. So those people who know about it, they'll know this. And every year has been going on for about 400 years. 6th of Marhum julus. This old lady, when her husband died, and she was alive up to pre-COVID, I don't know about now. She used to go and give water to the azadar of Imam Hussain. Right? She used to give water to the azadar of Imam Hussain. They say 1 year, her son died. When her son passed away, her husband died and her son was unmarried. Now, any mother whose son dies like this, in her heart deep down, she knew his nasl was finished. More than herself, she was mourning for him. Every morning she would go to his grave because she knew that after me no one's going to go to the grave. and every morning she would light a candle. Now imagine, this isn't a lifetime. This woman would go light a candle because she was saying that there's no one for my son after me. You've seen this yourself, how much a mother feels when the child is not there. This year, if you remember, at 3 p.m. on Arba'in Day, what did you see? There were mothers coming in whose sons had been killed by Daesh. And what were they saying? They were shouting out in the haram of Imam Hussain, "Sons, today we're not going to cry over you because your mothers are alive." Hussein's mother wasn't there to cry over him. So we're going to cry over Hussain. Right? So now imagine. So this woman, every single day she would come light a candle for her son. Day came, moon of Muharram. Last time she comes to her son's grave. She says, from now on for 10 days, I'm not going to come to your grave, son. Why? Higher purpose, Imam Hussain. First day comes. She gives water to the Azadar of Imam Hussain. She's ignoring her son. She's not thinking about it. Second day goes by. Third day goes by. Sixth day, Jalus in Jaunpur. There she is giving water. 7th, 8th, 9th, Ashura day. 11th of Muharram, she goes running to the grave of her son at Fajr time. You know when she gets there, it was still dark, the sun was coming up. She says that I saw that there were candles on the grave of my son. So I was thinking, what's the story here? When I looked, I saw a woman sitting there next to the grave of my son. So I, instinctively, as any mother would do, she goes, I think you're on the wrong grave. This is my son's grave. I said, I think you're on the wrong grave. This is my son's grave. Woman doesn't say anything. Again, remember, she's only got one son. That son's died. Again, she says, I think you're on the wrong grave. This is my son's grave. Third time she says, the woman replies. You know what the woman says? She goes, no, I'm at the right grave. You remembered my son for 10 days. I remembered your son for 10 days. Right? 10 days. That's how Kareem Ahlul Bayt are. Today, if you're remembering Hussain, you're crying over Hussain, you think he's not going to remember your father? Today, as you're sitting here, you think somebody's not going to come recite Fatih over the grave of your father? But today, let me tell you something. Cry in the way that Hussain likes you to cry. Today, imagine you're giving condolences to Zahra. Look, forget you're sitting here for a minute. Imagine you're giving condolences to Zahra. Look, brothers asked me to recite about Amir al-Mu'mineen. It breaks my heart reciting about Amir al-Mu'mineen. Why? The most loneliest of all of the Imams is Amir al-Mu'mineen. You know why? Look at it hadith and see. Ulama have narrated this. Every single Imam had somebody there. Even Sayyid al-Shuhada, Sayyid Zainab. Right, look at the day of Ashura and see what Imam Hussain says. You know what the tradition says? Tradition says when Imam Hussain was going for the final time into the battlefield, right? He just says one thing. As he was standing there, one other Shamil, one other Shamal, another Yamin, one other Shamal. Imam Hussain says something. He looks to the Maqtal and he says, Abbas, I was there to put you on the horse. He says, Ali Akbar, I was there to put you on the horse. He says, Qasim, I was there. Aun and Muhammad, I was there. Then he looks up and he says, but who's here for me? And when he's having this dialogue, the tradition says something. It says the old sister comes out, holding a hijab. She says, brother, don't ever say that you're lonely as long as I'm here. Right? Even Hussain had Zainab. Honestly. They say Amir al-Mu'mineen was gharib. Sayyid al-Shuhada, when he was attacking, every time he was attacking, he would say, look at a thirsty person fight. Look at a hungry person fight. And then he would look at the bodies and he would say, I was there to encourage you. Who's there to encourage me? They say a sister comes out. She just says one thing. She says, Marhaba yabna Rasulullah. Zainab was encouraging Imam Hussain all the way through. Ask Amir al-Mu'mineen's heart. Who was there when Amir al-Mu'mineen was there? Honestly. Why is Ali the most loneliest? They say even after 30 years, Amir al-Mu'mineen was coming. He was sitting there crying one day in the desert. Kumail comes, says, Mawla, what are you crying for? He says, don't you know, I miss Zahra. Amir al-Mu'mineen had no one to talk to after Zahra. Loneliness, feel Ali's loneliness. Feel Ali's loneliness. If I can say a couple of things about Amir al-Mu'mineen. 33-year-old man. They say Imam Hussain used to cry a lot after Zahra's death, more than Imam Hussain. One day Fidda comes to him and asks him, says, son, why do you cry more than Hussain? You know what he replies? He says, I was standing outside, Hussain was inside. Amir al-Mu'mineen would comfort Imam Hassan. But there was one thing that Zahra said to Hassan, Hassan, don't tell your father what happened. What was it? You know, I can't narrate it, but when she was lying on the floor and Imam Hassan was trying to rescue his mother, he was only 6 years old. Marwan Hakam grabbed Imam Hassan by the neck and chucked him on the ground. Zahra was lying there. She just says one thing. She says this. She says, son Hassan, what took place on me? Don't ever tell your father what happened. Said, don't ever tell your father what happened. That's what Imam Hassan was holding in his heart, right? Imagine Amir al-Mu'mineen, 33-year-old man, takes his wife, puts her in the grave, right? Puts her in the grave. Tradition says, Nasiyat of Zahra was recite Quran in my grave. 33, begins to recite Quran. Time comes to finish. Tries to stand up. Hadith says his knees begin to shake. Ali falls onto the ground. When the Imam falls onto the ground, tradition says 2 children were watching. Imam couldn't make eye contact with his children. Puts his head down. They say Salman says something. He says, Ali, we didn't see you fall like this in Khaybar. What makes you fall like this? Imam remained quiet. Second time he tries to stand up. His knees start shaking, gives way, falls again. Second time he falls. Second time again he doesn't look because 2 children are watching him. He feels embarrassed. They say third time he tries to get up. He puts his hand on the wall of the grave. His legs begin to shake again. Hadith says something. He says all of a sudden he says something. From inside of him a voice comes. You know what that voice was? Zainab, come to me because your father's feeling weak today. 5-year-old girl puts her arms out, says, Father, come to me. This is where the challenge of Amir al-Mu'mineen begins. From all of his children, Zainab made Ali cry. Why? Fathers are close to their daughters, you know that. Your daughter's in pain, she doesn't call her husband, she'll call you, even if your father's old. Right? Fathers are close. Your difficult moment in your life when your daughter leaves you, right? When she gets married. You know as a father what that means. I don't need to tell you. I don't need to tell you. Said the most difficult moment for Amir al-Mu'mineen was when, that day when Zainab was to be married. Amir al-Mu'mineen was standing there. In the Hijazi culture, mothers take their daughters to the houses of their fathers. They say Amir al-Mu'mineen was standing there with tears in her eyes because why? Zainab was standing next to the door. There was no mother to take her. Eventually, al-Baneen comes forward, grabs Zainab by the arm and takes her. Right? They say Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he came and he went in the Hujra, he sees Hussain was crying. Hussain was crying. He says, Hussain, what are you crying for? He says, Father, I've never been separated from my sister like this. He says, can I go to my sister? Says, yes, go. Hussain goes, knocks on the door. Fidda answers. Says, can I see my sister? Says, come in. What did he see? Walks in through the... He says, Zainab was there. Hair was open, hands was raised. Allah, I've never been separated from my Hussain like this. Right? Brother, sister begin to cry. You can imagine the relationship there. Then what happens? They say Amir al-Mu'mineen becomes Khalifa. Shifts to Kufa. I'm reciting slowly because if I was to recite more, you wouldn't be able to take it. Says after that, Amir al-Mu'mineen says something. He says, son, Hassan, I miss my daughters. Can you go to Medina and bring them? Imam Hassan comes to Medina. Mahalla Bani Hashim was the place, walks in. He says, daughters of Ali, Ali misses you. One daughter stands up and comes forward. That daughter's name was Zainab. She says, tell our father, we miss him more. Imam Hassan says, come. Amir al-Mu'mineen is calling you. Caravan is taken. Caravan comes to the borders of Kufa. Imam Hussain comes in. Amir al-Mu'mineen was in the minbar. Imam stops. He says, Ya Bunayya Hassan, alaykum bil-layl. Bring them in at night time, not at the daytime. Ali's ghayra can't take it that Zainab is coming. Ali's ghayra can't take it. Zainab is coming, and people say, bring her at night time. He says at night time, old father himself goes. Imam Hassan was holding the camel of Zainab. Comes forward. He says, son, do I have the permission to take my daughter in today? He says, father's your daughter. You do what you want. Comes, holds onto the camel. Says, Zainab, remove the curtains and look, Zainab. This is the boundaries of Kufa, Zainab. Right? Zainab looks. Zainab looks. Imam begins to walk again. Imam then walks. He says, Zainab, now undo the curtains and look. This is the first street of Kufa, Zainab. Again, Imam begins to walk. Imam now stops again. Says, Zainab, now look. This is the first road of Kufa. Again, Zainab looks. Again, Imam begins to walk. Again, now Imam comes. This time, though, the Imam says something. He says, Zainab, now look. This is the bazaar of Kufa. Zainab can't take it anymore. She says, tell Abbas, tell Muhammad Hanafiya, father, I'm never going to go here. He says, no, Zainab, a time is going to come. A time is going to come. Look, I can't narrate anything more than that. 19th of Muharram, 19th of Ramadan comes, 19th leaves. 20th of Ramadan, tradition says something. It says a physician comes, he says to Imam Hassan, he says that your father's going to die. There's enough poison to poison all of Kufa on the sword. Your father's going to die. But there's one thing that can slow his pain down. Says, what is that? Milk. Tradition says this, that when the yatim, all of the orphans found out, all of these children were standing outside with bowls in their hand, and all of them were saying, give our father milk. We'll go hungry, but we want to give something to our father. Imam Hassan looks at the children, comes back in, and he just says one thing to Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, all of these orphans are standing there with milk. They want you to get better. Imam replies, he says, I've never taken anything from an orphan. Look, now that I'm on this, can I just say one thing? You know how painful it is on the heart of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Let me just say one thing. An orphan is a person whose father's not there. Sharia says not a person whose mother's not there, a father's not there. That's what an orphan is. They say that when Qasim was 6 months old and he was crawling onto the chest of his father, when his father's inside was cutting, his mother comes, Farwa comes, picks up Qasim. Imam Hassan says one thing, leave him because after today he's going to become yatim. Shall I tell you something? When the day of Eid used to come, and all of the fathers were holding their son's hand and taking him to Masjid al-Nabawi, one orphan would be standing in Jannat al-Baqi and saying, Father, if only you were alive, you would have taken me by the hand as well. Now imagine what Amir al-Mu'mineen knows this. He knows his children are becoming yatim. Look, accelerating all of it forward. You know what it says? Amir al-Mu'mineen gathers all of his children. He says one thing to Imam Hassan. He says, Hassan, where's Hussain? I can't see Hussain anywhere. Where's Hussain? They say Imam Hassan goes into a room. They see Imam Hussain was crying. You know how he was crying? You know, have you seen a child cry? You know when they cry, they start choking on their tongue and they can't breathe. They say Imam Hussain was crying like this. Imam Hassan says something. He says, brother, if you're going to cry like this, what's our father going to say? Control yourself, come. As he comes, Imam Hussain's trying to control. He sees his father, begins to cry. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says one thing. He says, Hussain, don't worry. This time will pass, Hussain. You know what Imam Hussain says something? Imam Hussain says something which was painful. He says, Father, when our Jad Rasulullah died, you were there to hug us. You were there to put your hand over our head. When our mother Zahra died, you were there to hug us. You were there to put your hand over our head. Says, Father, this is Kufa. When you die tomorrow, who's going to be there to hug us? Like, I can't recite anymore. The 21st of Ramadan comes. Amir al-Mu'mineen is about to leave this world. He says to everyone, go, everyone go. Final person to come is Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab walks. She puts her head on the shoulder of her father, says that as she does this, she begins to cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen now begins to cry. At that moment, he whispers something into her ear that Zainab goes quiet. You know what that was? Ali is leaving this world, but he whispers something in Zainab's ear. Daughter's a daughter. She remembered this years later. I looked everywhere to find one hadith. I found what it was. Where was this? Bazar-e-Sham. All of you have been to Bazar-e-Sham. You know how quickly you can go through it. They say when Zainab came to Bazar-e-Sham, she sat on the door of the bazaar. Shimr was lashing her. Zainab didn't get up. People were chucking stones at her. Zainab wasn't getting up. They were chucking hot water. Zainab wasn't getting up. Tradition says Imam Zain al-Abidin comes. He says, "Aunt, why don't you go in? Are you startled?" Say that Zainab looks up and replies, "Son, I'm not startled." Says, "Then what is it?" She says, "I remembered the night when my father was leaving me." Says, "What did he say?" He says, "Zainab, when Bazar-e-Sham comes, it'll be the most difficult moment for you. Zainab, don't be startled, don't worry. Wait for me, Zainab. I'll come. I'll take you by the hand and take you in. Sajjad, I'm waiting for my father to come so we can..." History doesn't say what happened after that, but an old daughter stands up and says, "Assalamu alayka, ya Matam Hussain."
ज़ैनब उजड़ी जंग करबला दी मुक गई लुटियां गईयां रे दावा वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावा या शाम नू जावा वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावा या शाम नू जावा कवे ज़ैनब उजड़ी जंग करबला दी मुक गई लुटियां गईयां रे दावा वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावा या शाम नू जावा वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावा या शाम नू जावा कीवे शाम ले जावा सजाद बीमारे होश नहीं आंदी सिरां विच असी बाल लुकाए उम्मत ने रसियां दे सानू जेवर पाए मैं सुने वीर हाय शाम दे शहर दियां बहु औखियां ने रावां वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावां या शाम नू जावां वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावां या शाम नू जावां उठ तो मैं लथ पईयां पर रो नहीं सकदी लाश उते पत्थरां दा हाय ढेर हां तकदी मेरे हथ पाबंद हैं किवें लाश तो मैं तेरी पत्थरां नू हटावां वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावां या शाम नू जावां वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावां या शाम नू जावां अख्तर दुनिया फानी एक दिन मुक जानी रहनी ये दो जग ते सैयदां दी कहानी लख रो के दुनिया पुरसे नू कैम रखना ज़हरा दियां दुआवां वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावां या शाम नू जावां वीर ना मैं तेरी कबर बनावां या शाम नू जावां कबे ज़ैनब उजड़ी जग करबला दी मुक गई लुटियां गईयां रिदावां वीर ना दुश्मनाने अहले बैत पे सुबह शाम लानत
توجه زيارة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين وسيد الوصيين إمام المتقين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس وأختيك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان، سيدي الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهور العمر. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. سورة الفاتحة.